It is catching up to me, but I reckon I can do this. Today, I want to talk a bit about yoga. To me, it's important because I identify it as an inward process. If you remember, I talked about modern Western psychology, psychiatric treatment as being an inward process. This reinforces it, although it's going to be rather superficial. It just sort of builds the picture out a bit. And for a lead in to those who are watching who might not be familiar with what it is, I heard Sadhguru explain this, Sadhguru Jagji Vasudev. Could have come from anywhere, but that's where I heard it. He explains that most of the lands of this world are lands of faith. Lands of faith. You ask a person what their religion is, it's the same as asking, what is your faith? What are you devoted to? What do you worship? Right. Yes. Yes. Now, the rest of the lands of the world, as I said, lands of faith. India is one prominent exception. An Indian wakes up in the morning, he goes, oh, here I am again in this physical body. This is not me. I want to know who I really am. It's called self-realisation, translated roughly into English. He goes out into the world and looks around and not really satisfactory. He has a deep inward feeling that this is not where he belongs. He wants to get to where he should be. They call it moksha. Translates as liberation. So he's got these two things going on that most of the people and most of the rest of the world don't have. So to that end, they developed these systems of yoga. Now, it's not just one thing. It depends on your aptitude. You know, we know in the outward world, in the material world, materialistic world, we would gravitate towards, look, I'm thinking of a whole system that would take another video, but on the line of love, there are the nurturing people. Nurses would be typical. There's a whole big bunch of those. At one end of there are the artists, the people who like to decorate things and do entertainment, and to them how things appear is much more important than how things work. And up the other end, the people who are all about how things work, this is where you find your scientists and engineers. So just as an analogy, those are the sorts of very broad ways we can divide our aptitudes that relate to the outside world. So in the inner world, we've got these different, there are different branches of yoga depending on what your aptitude is. So if you have very deep faith, then you do this. You take the path of devotion. It can be a valid path. Just in no particular order going around here. There's one for intellectuals. They take the approach that what you do is you carve off everything that can be shown to be not true, so that what you're left with must be true. That's my simplistic. Well, I've read that, and I'm just sort of relaying it. This one down here, if you can see it, path of, I'd have to put my glasses on, path of fusion. That's very profound, that one. These are your candle gazers and people like that. To see what is really real, you've got an obstacle in the way. You can go from the physical to the emotional to the mental, and here is your mind. And most people will people identify themselves. Some people identify themselves as the physical body. Some people identify with their emotions. A lot of people identify themselves as how they think. Their mind is them, they reckon. But that's not true. That's only three of them. The mind, as useful a tool as it is only that, it's a tool. And you need to get it out of the way so that you can see what's really true. There are different ways to approach this, and one of the names for this is Turya, T-U-R-Y-A-H. I haven't got it written down. Turya. So there are four. We're familiar with three states. There's actually a fourth one. Now, this is what the mind, I'm going into detail here, but anyway, the mind likes to skip around. It doesn't like being held on any particular one thing. And so if you can keep your attention on just one thing, it'll get bored and get out of the way and let you see what's really real. That's the theory behind this. One more. Oh, we got two more. I want to talk about this one in the middle. One more here. This one is for technically minded people. They like to understand how things work, particularly behind the scenes. They're all into metaphysics. You start talking about chakras and nadis and practices which involve, and I'll see if I can remember all these practices which involve things like attention shifting, control of the breath. There are some physical actions, and you may or may not see what's going on, and sounds. Elementary sounds can have effects, and so you work with all these to shift things around behind the scenes. So that's technical range. This one here is the one I want to expand on, and it's for systematic people. People who are systematic. There's an aptitude. That's the one that's called Raja Yoga, R-A-J-A, Royal Yoga. They call it the Eightfold Path. Now, you've almost all come across these first four rungs of the path are external, they're outside, and you would be familiar with that. It's called Hatha Yoga, H-A-T-H-A. Westerners say see a T-H and say it's th. It's not, it's t. But anyway, I'm just being picky. Hatha Yoga, the first four rungs of this 8-rung path. And strictly those are the yamas and niyamas. This is the do's and the don'ts. And I'll just backtrack a little bit here. Oh, I've always got a book to show you. I've forgotten it because I got this long ago and I must have read some of it. Can't remember any of it. The Yoga Sutras of, and I'm going to stumble over this, Patanjali. And that's only one small book. There's a vast quantity of sacred literature from India. So I thought I'd show you that just out of interest. Oh yeah, and why I wanted to point to that was, what I thought it was, somewhere right at the start, and I tried to find it again and I couldn't, right at the start. He says, yoga is samadhi. This is where the objective of all this is to unite your individual self with your true self. If you remembered what I said, self-realisation. So that's the objective, and you can claim that you are practicing yoga if you've decided this is where I want to get to. Right, now, the things if you, do's and don'ts, postures, which you'd be familiar with, breathing exercises are very, very important because they set you up for doing this transition from outside to inside. What most people would be familiar with, it's commonly called yoga in the West, has to do with these, the sitting postures and the exercise postures. They're important, but those are the ones that Westerners I would recognise. If you go to YouTube and just type in yoga, you'll get dozens and dozens of videos of teenage girls getting into contortions accompanied by a whole lot of squealing and giggling. That's not yoga. They've pulled some little techniques out of these, and now in the West we've got things like yoga for business people, yoga for golf. Well, if it's business or golf, that's not self-realisation, I'm afraid. It's just, okay, you know, you can do that. There's nothing to stop you. Please don't call it yoga. You can say, you know, yogic techniques to help your golf game or something like that. You might be able to say, but it's not going to get you to there. Right, outside, inside. This, once you've accomplished all these, and like I say, in a systematic function, you work through these systematically. I'm not quite sure. They say the breath is the bridge between the body and its senses and the mind. And what they mean by the breath, I haven't been able to track it down. The breath is not breathing. It's not just huffing and puffing air in and out. I suspect it's got more to do with the direction of attention, because your attention is outward doing this, and these are with your attention inside. Remember, if you saw my segment on Western psychology, where I might have tried to explain that psychiatric functions require to go inside. You know, they're not going to teach you how to build a house or repair a car or something like that. It's all inward work. Now we're getting there slowly. Inside. We're inside now. And the steps inside are, if I try to give you the Sanskrit terms for these, I'll stumble over them and they won't mean anything to you anyway. So these are the roughly English translations. So you practice concentration. You learn to hold your attention on one subject. Contemplation. You start turning it over. People who are good at inventing are good at this. Nearly everyone can do this. And this is, excuse me, sorry, nuisance phone call, where was I? Concentration, contemplation. Yeah, I think I was about to explain, a few days ago, well, much earlier than that, this was one of the things that I put a miniature of when I was splattering everything on the other board. And only a couple of days ago, when I was planning this out a bit more, I realised I'm claiming this is an inward process, and I said before, any internal process will tend to help you develop your self-assurance. And for a couple of days I thought something's not adding up. I've always been good at concentrating and contemplating. Why didn't that give me immunity against the hooligans, the bodgies, the bullies? It seemed to attract them more than anything. And for a couple of days I agonised over that, and then I realised, duh, where was your attention? You were applying it outwardly to schoolwork, which drags your attention outwards and forwards. You need to have your attention back inside to apply this. And when you do this, I suggest it's rather similar to psychotherapy. Dealing with your inner demons. And once you're established inside this far, the next thing to aim for is meditation. Now, I'm afraid there's some horrible misconceptions amongst Westerners about what meditation is and what it is not. In the texts, they make it clear that, look, going right back, I remember reading it in the Upanishads. Meditation is one without a second. What does that mean? You see, in our experience, there's always, you're the observer and you're observing something out there. There's an observer and the observed. In meditation, there's no distinction. You become the thing that you've got your attention fixed on. It's all fused together. I can't say I do this often. I've got a vivid memory of a couple of minutes in which I could claim I achieved that. And it wasn't even anything spiritual. It was very mundane, actually. So when Westerners say, "Oh, I've been doing meditations," sometimes you can sit and churn things over yourself. You can imagine rainbows and unicorns or something like that. Or you can lie down and someone will play a recording of, suggestions, guided visualization, that sort of thing. That can achieve some little things, but strictly it is not meditation. Oh dear. So, have I ever got up to here? Well, I can't really claim to have. It's possible I did momentarily, but I can't expand on that much. I would go so far as to say that this is what we all fell out of. We just don't remember being there. We don't remember that it happened or how it happened. And so we have to work our way back. I think suddenly that's it. That is it. Not for everyone. Like I said, Indians have got, this is the stuff that drives them. They just have these convictions within themselves that they have to do this. All around the rest of the world, not so important. We try to go materialistic ways about making our lives comfortable, and anything else that we don't know how to explain, we just pray and have faith. Give it up to something else, to some divinity. Yeah. So, but I've never had any faith. Geez, I mentioned this to my sister on a phone call, and I almost felt her shock the other end of the phone. it's the only time I've heard her shocked, actually. She said, "You've got to have faith, or you can't be saved." Okay, too bad. I could go on and on about that. Not everyone agrees about that. So anyway, yeah, terms of faith. I will try to explain a little about how this path of devotion works. Imagine a teenager who has put a big colour poster on their bedroom wall of a sporting idol, a popular music group, that sort of thing. And a strange thing happens. You'll notice over time that they've absorbed the mannerisms, the style of speech, they have to have the clothing, they have to have the t-shirt, the cap. They absorb the characteristics of this thing that they basically worship. So that's the mechanism for this path of devotion. It doesn't necessarily have to be some divine entity for the mechanism to work, but that's the mechanism. Yeah, that's why I've followed this up to some extent, and I'm afraid the faith people would be horrified to see some of the things I do these days. It's not as though it's anything. It's not. They'd say, "Oh, work of the devil" and all that sort of thing. You know, it's not. No, not at all. So anyway, I don't know. I was trying to find a way to finish this, but yeah, it's just I wanted to mention that to you because it reinforces this idea that inward processes are useful. Yeah, in the West, they've got this in the East. In the West now we have modern psychology trying to deal with most of this. If you ask what we had before in the West, I was only thinking about this within the last hour or two. Look, before we had this so-called enlightenment and we started using our brains to nut things out, there were systems, and you might not like me mentioning it, but in the West before that we had things like astrology and alchemy were the repositories of all this sort of information. They are more vast than you can imagine. You know, it's not just the one page in the glossy women's magazine or something like that that tells you. You know, some money's coming your way this week or something like that. No. No. All that was within those subjects. So I think I might, yeah, that might have to do it unless I think of something else.